This remote mining town vanished in a single night, leaving behind only the chilling silence of an empty shaft, and the few who returned never truly understood why. In the next 30 minutes, I will reveal the impossible truth behind the mine's eerie whispers, the forgotten journal entry that changed everything, and the terrifying reason why some sounds should never be heard. But first, listen closely to this. Imagine a faint, disembodied hum, slowly growing into a chorus of desperate, echoing pleas from the deepest dark. That's just the beginning. The story of Blackwood Mine begins not with a bang, but with a barely perceptible hum. Miners, hardened by years of delving into the Earth's unforgiving maw, started reporting strange echoes, disembodied voices that seemed to drift from the deepest, most untouched veins of the mountain. At first, they dismissed it as the tricks of the mind, the claustrophobia of the dark playing havoc with their senses. But the whispers grew, evolving from indistinct murmurs to something far more coherent, far more unsettling. The initial reports came from the lowest levels, where the air was thick with dust and the clang of pickaxes. Old Man Hemlock, a foreman with a face etched by rock dust and worry, was the first to seriously document the phenomena. He described a feeling of being watched, a cold breath on his neck, even when standing in an empty tunnel. He swore he heard his own name called, clear as day, from a darkness no lantern could penetrate. This wasn't merely a trick of the echo, it was a directed, malevolent sound. This was the first mistake everyone made, underestimating the subtlety of the threat. The Blackwood Mining Company, more concerned with quarterly profits than ghostly tales, merely issued a memo about fatigue-induced auditory hallucinations and increased shifts. They believed the miners were simply overworked, their imaginations running wild in the oppressive solitude of the tunnels. The company doctors prescribed sedatives and rest, completely missing the true, terrifying nature of the problem festering beneath their feet. The whispers began to follow the miners home, or so they claimed. Wives reported their husbands waking in cold sweats, muttering about voices pleading from the walls, begging for release. Children started drawing disturbing pictures of shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their rooms, their tiny ears apparently picking up frequencies adults couldn't. A pervasive dread began to settle over the entire town, a silent, creeping terror that no amount of rationalization could dispel. What started as a curiosity quickly morphed into an obsession for some, and a deep-seated fear for others. The sounds were no longer confined to the mine. They seemed to seep into the very fabric of Blackwood. The air grew heavy, the nights longer, and the silence between the whispers became even more terrifying than the voices themselves. It was as if the mountain itself was breathing, a monstrous entity slowly waking from a primordial slumber, and the miners were the unwitting harbingers of its awakening. The company's dismissive attitude was shattered the day Silas Croft, a young, robust miner, emerged from the shaft screaming, his eyes wide with a terror that no man had ever seen before. He spoke of a voice, not a whisper, but a resonant bellow that vibrated through his very bones, demanding he return what was taken. He then collapsed, convulsing, and within hours was dead. The official cause, a massive heart attack, but everyone in Blackwood knew better. Silas's death was the first undeniable proof that something was deeply wrong, something beyond fatigue or hallucination. His fellow miners, previously skeptical or simply afraid to speak up, now whispered openly about the mine being cursed. They talked about a specific section, a newly excavated chamber on the 5th level, where the air was always colder and the whispers were strongest, almost tangible. It was there, they believed, that the true source of the voices resided. This was the resolution to the first mistake. The early signs were not just ignored, they were actively suppressed. The company doctor, Dr. Albright, a man known for his meticulous records, had actually noted a peculiar pattern in the miners' ailments, not just fatigue, but sudden, unexplained fevers, disorientation, and a rapid onset of paranoia. He'd tried to raise concerns, but his reports were buried under a mountain of corporate indifference deemed unscientific and bad for morale. The company's insistence on profitability over safety created a dangerous echo chamber, where the truth was drowned out by the clinking of coins. Had they listened to the initial subtle warnings, the strange dreams, the increasing anxiety, the specific details provided by multiple unrelated miners, they might have prevented the tragedy that was about to unfold. But the lure of the rich ore deposits, rumored to be the largest in the region, blinded them to the growing darkness. The mine, once a symbol of prosperity, was transforming into a gaping maw of dread. The once vibrant community of Blackwood began to show cracks. Miners, driven by desperation, still descended, but their movements were slow, their faces etched with a fear that went beyond the dangers of cave-ins. They were now facing an enemy far more insidious, an unseen entity that preyed on their minds, whispering promises and threats from the cold, unyielding rock. After Silas's death, a palpable shift occurred. The whispers intensified, becoming less random, more targeted. Miners reported feeling a distinct presence, a non-physical entity that moved through the tunnels with them, its cold breath a constant companion. It wasn't just sounds anymore, it was an oppressive atmosphere, a suffocating dread that clung to the very air in the mine. The tools felt heavier, the rock seemed to resist their efforts, and the darkness itself felt alive. One night, a small team led by Foreman Hemlock discovered something truly bizarre. Deep within the newly opened 5th level where Silas had last worked, they found a section of rock that pulsed with a faint, ethereal light, almost imperceptible. It was not bioluminescent fungus, nor any mineral they recognized. When touched, it was intensely cold, and a low, guttural hum emanated directly from it, a sound that seemed to bypass their ears and resonate within their skulls. This was the detail. Nobody noticed until it was too late, the subtle, almost geological anomalies. Dr. Albright, in his suppressed reports, had also mentioned unusual seismic activity, minor tremors that didn't align with known fault lines or mining blasts. He theorized a localized, unknown geological phenomenon, but his theories were dismissed as irrelevant. The pulsing rock, the localized cold, the strange vibrations. These were all pieces of a puzzle nobody bothered to assemble. The miners, in their desperate attempt to understand, started attributing human characteristics to the unseen presence. They called it the sleeper or the whisperer. Some even believed it was the restless spirit of an ancient people whose burial grounds they had disturbed. This personification, while providing a psychological anchor, also masked the true, alien nature of what they were dealing with, preventing them from seeking real answers. The fear was no longer just about the mine. It was about the unknown. The men who went down into Blackwood Mine were not just digging for ore. They were disturbing something ancient, something primordial, something that had been waiting patiently in the dark for millennia. The whispers were its voice, the cold its touch, and the pulsing rock its very heart, slowly beating back to life. Every swing of a pickaxe, every blast was a wake-up call to an entity best left undisturbed. The phenomena escalated dramatically. Equipment malfunctions became rampant, not due to mechanical failure, but as if an invisible force was deliberately tampering with the machinery. Lights flickered and died, drills jammed inexplicably, and even the sturdy mine carts would sometimes derail themselves, as if thrown by an unseen hand. It was a subtle sabotage, designed to isolate and terrify. One evening, after a particularly harrowing shift, A group of miners swore they saw shadowy figures moving in the periphery of their headlamps, fleeting glimpses of forms that were too tall, too thin, too fluid to be human. These apparitions never fully materialized, always receding into the deeper shadows, leaving behind only a lingering chill and a profound sense of utter dread. The psychological toll was immense. Men began refusing to enter the mine despite the threat of losing their jobs. This was the resolution to the second subloop. The detail nobody noticed was not just the pulsing rock or the seismic anomalies, but the consistent, intelligent pattern of the disturbances. Dr. Albright's final, desperate addendum to his reports, which was intercepted and destroyed, detailed how the events were escalating in a calculated manner, almost as if learning and adapting. He theorized a non-human intelligence capable of manipulating its environment. The truth was that the entity was not a ghost or a spirit. It was something far more ancient, far more alien. The pulsing rock wasn't just a geological anomaly. It was a conduit, a nexus of energy, perhaps even a living organ of something vast and incomprehensible beneath the earth. The mine, in essence, had become a gateway, and the miners trespassers. The whispers, the shadows, the cold, the mechanical failures, all were part of a sophisticated, terrifying communication, a warning that was tragically misunderstood. If you're finding this descent into Blackwood's darkness as captivating as it is chilling, consider hitting that like button and subscribing. It helps us keep unearthing these forgotten horrors, ensuring these stories are never truly silenced. The deeper we go, the more terrifying the truth becomes, and you won't want to miss what we uncover next. The whispers, which had once been a source of terror, now took on a new, more sinister quality. They became persuasive. Miners reported hearing voices promising them riches, knowledge, or even eternal life, if only they would release something from the deepest chamber. Others heard their loved ones pleading for help from within the rock itself, a horrifying manipulation that drove some to the brink of madness, desperate to save phantoms. It was during this time of heightened psychological warfare that a young, ambitious geologist named Arthur Finch arrived in Blackwood, sent by the company to investigate the unexplained phenomena and restore order. Finch was a skeptic, armed with scientific instruments and an unwavering belief in logic. He dismissed the miners' stories as mass hysteria, a product of their superstitious minds and the oppressive environment. He would soon learn the true cost of his arrogance. Finch, however, was meticulous. While dismissing the supernatural, he couldn't ignore the geological anomalies. He studied the pulsing rock, took samples, and meticulously mapped the energy fluctuations. He was looking for a rational explanation, a unique mineral deposit, an undiscovered gas. What he found instead, hidden in a forgotten supply closet near the mine entrance, was a tattered, leather-bound journal. This was the introduction to the third subloop, the truth behind the lost journal. It belonged to Elias Thorne, one of the original prospectors who had first discovered the Blackwood ore veins over a century ago. Thorne was not just a prospector. He was an amateur folklorist, deeply interested in the local indigenous legends and the ancient tales of the land. His journal, filled with cryptic entries and strange drawings, painted a horrifying picture that predated the mine itself. The journal described not just the discovery of rich ore, but also a deep, ancient warning passed down through generations. It spoke of the Sleeper, a vast, non-human entity entombed beneath the mountain, whose dreams were the very whispers now plaguing Blackwood. Thorne believed the mountain was not just a mountain, but a prison, and the ore was merely the hardened byproduct of its slumber, a material infused with its very essence. Arthur Finch, initially dismissive of Thorne's superstitious ramblings, found himself increasingly drawn into the journal's narrative. Thorne detailed how the indigenous tribes had always warned against digging too deep, of disturbing the mountain's breath. They believed that those who dared to breach the lowest chambers would not find gold, but an awakening, a release of something that would consume all. Finch, with his scientific mind, started to see patterns that transcended folklore. Thorne's journal described a ritual, an ancient method used by the tribes not to appease but to contain the sleeper, using specific sound frequencies and patterned vibrations to maintain its dormant state. He theorized that the modern mining operations, with their constant drilling and blasting, were inadvertently disrupting this ancient delicate balance, acting as a reverse ritual, slowly rousing the entity from its profound slumber. This was the resolution to the third subloop. The truth behind the lost journal revealed that Blackwood Mine wasn't just a site for resource extraction. It was an ancient prison, and the miners were its unwitting jailbreakers. The ore, so eagerly sought, was in fact a part of the prison's very structure, a barrier infused with the sleeper's suppressive energy. Every ton extracted weakened the cage, every blast chipped away at its walls, slowly releasing the ancient horror within. Finch's meticulous notes, now filled with frantic scrawls, began to confirm Thorne's seemingly outlandish claims. He cross-referenced the journal's descriptions with his own seismic data, finding correlations between intensified mining activity and increased energy fluctuations from the pulsing rock. The whispers weren't just random sounds, they were the sleeper's attempts at communication, growing stronger as its prison weakened. Now, a new, terrifying question emerged, leading into the fourth subloop. What were the experts hiding? Finch realized that Thorne's journal couldn't be the only record of this ancient entity. The sheer scale of the phenomenon suggested a knowledge that must have been suppressed, perhaps, by the very institutions that now profited from Blackwood Mine. The truth was far more insidious than a simple mining accident. Finch's investigation took a darker turn as he began to suspect a deliberate cover-up. He noticed anomalies in the geological surveys provided by the government, subtle alterations that downplayed the unique composition of Blackwood's rock formations and the unusual energy signatures. It was as if someone had gone to great lengths to ensure that no one would question the mine's true nature. His own requests for deeper geological data were met with bureaucratic stonewalling and vague excuses. He discovered that the Blackwood Mining Company itself had ties to a shadowy government-backed research initiative from the early 20th century, a program ostensibly focused on unconventional energy sources. Thorne's journal mentioned cryptic visits from men in dark suits who showed an unnatural interest in the indigenous legends surrounding the mountain long before the mine was even established. These men were clearly not just prospectors. This was the resolution to the fourth subloop. What the experts were hiding was not just knowledge, but a deliberate century-long exploitation. The government, or at least a powerful faction within it, knew about the sleeper. They understood the mountain was a prison, and the unique ore was not just valuable for its material worth, but for its strange, energy-dampening properties. They were not just mining for profit, they were harvesting the prison walls. The chilling implication was that the whispers, the fear, the disappearances, they were all collateral damage in a secret, long-term project. The unconventional energy source wasn't some new technology, it was the very essence of the sleeper, slowly siphoned off as its prison weakened. The mining operations were merely a front, a convenient way to access and exploit an ancient cosmic power, regardless of the cost to human lives or sanity. Finch, now a pariah, isolated and terrified, understood he was dealing with forces far beyond a simple mining company. He realized the true horror wasn't just the monster in the mine, but the monsters in suits who consciously allowed its awakening for their own unfathomable gains. He was now a target, possessing knowledge that could expose a conspiracy spanning generations, a truth that would shatter the foundations of their engineered reality. Finch, desperate to find a way to recontain the sleeper, returned to Thorne's journal. He found fragmented notes about resonance patterns and harmonic frequencies that the indigenous tribes used. Thorne had theorized that if the mountain was a prison, these frequencies were the keys to its lock, designed to maintain the entity's dormant state. Finch, now convinced of the entity's existence, saw a desperate, last-ditch hope in these ancient principles. He began experimenting with sound. Using rudimentary equipment, he tried to replicate the harmonic patterns described in the journal, focusing his efforts on the pulsing rock in the 5th level. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The whispers intensified, becoming a cacophony of enraged roars and desperate screams, as if the entity was fighting against the very frequencies designed to suppress it. The mine itself seemed to groan in protest. This was the introduction to the 5th subloop, the secret technique that could recontain the sleeper. It wasn't about brute force or advanced technology, but a forgotten understanding of vibrational energy and its profound effect on the primordial entity. The indigenous people had mastered a form of acoustic engineering, a way to lull the creature back into its deep, ancient slumber, using the very air it breathed. Finch believed that the original prison wasn't just physical rock, but a complex interplay of geological structure and resonant frequencies, a giant natural sound dampener. The mining, by removing material and introducing new vibrations, had thrown this delicate system into chaos. His task was to re-establish that harmonic balance, to sing the sleeper back to sleep, even if it meant risking his own sanity in the process. The weight of the world, or at least Blackwood, rested on Finch's shoulders. He was alone, hunted by the very powers he sought to expose, armed only with an ancient journal and a makeshift sound generator. The whispers were now a constant deafening roar, trying to break his will, to drive him mad before he could complete his desperate mission. He was standing on the precipice of an ancient horror, trying to mend a cosmic wound. Finch worked feverishly, surrounded by the escalating chaos of the mine. The ground trembled constantly, rockfalls became frequent, and the air crackled with an unseen energy. The whispers were no longer just voices. They were mental assaults, images of unimaginable horror flooding his mind, twisting his perception of reality. He was losing himself, but he knew he couldn't stop. The fate of Blackwood, and perhaps beyond, depended on his success. He finally managed to calibrate his crude device, combining the indigenous harmonic patterns with the specific resonant frequencies he'd extracted from the pulsing rock itself. As he activated it, a low, resonant hum filled the 5th level, a counter-frequency that battled the chaotic roars of the sleeper. For a moment the mine went silent. Then a shriek, so profound, so utterly alien, tore through the air, shaking the very foundations of the mountain. This was the resolution to the 5th subloop. The secret technique was a forgotten form of acoustic resonance, designed to create a vibrational cage around the entity. Finch had managed to reactivate the ancient prison, but not without a horrifying cost. The entity, now fully awake and enraged, was fighting back with a primal fury, its true form hinting at a scale and power that defied human comprehension. The final plot twist began to unfold. The whispers were not just attempts at communication or manipulation. They were echoes of a vast collective consciousness, trapped and suffering. The sleeper wasn't just one entity, it was a nexus, a conduit for countless beings from another dimension, screaming in agony from their eternal prison. The mine had pierced the veil, and Blackwood was now caught in the crossfire of cosmic pain. As Finch's device hummed, the mountain began to collapse, not just a controlled cave-in, but a seismic event of unprecedented scale, as if the earth itself was trying to reseal the wound. Finch, caught in the maelstrom, could only watch as the pulsing rock, the heart of the prison, began to glow with an unbearable intensity, a final, desperate surge of energy before the mountain swallowed it whole. The mountain roared, then fell silent. When the dust finally settled, Blackwood Mine was gone, swallowed by a massive sinkhole that stretched for miles. The town itself was abandoned, its few remaining inhabitants fleeing in terror, their minds shattered by the impossible sounds and sights they had witnessed. Arthur Finch was never seen again. His journal, however, was found, clutched in the hand of a miner who barely escaped, its final pages stained with blood and frantic, desperate warnings. The ultimate plot twist revealed that the government's true secret was not just exploitation, but fear. They hadn't just been harvesting energy, they were trying to understand and control a force they barely comprehended, a force that threatened not just humanity, but the very fabric of their reality. Finch's desperate act, while sealing the mine, also alerted them to the true scale of the danger, creating a new, more intense campaign of suppression. The sleeper, or rather the collective consciousness it represented, was re-imprisoned, but the silence that followed was not one of peace. It was the silence of a scar, a wound in the earth that still pulsed with an unseen energy. The whispers had stopped, but the memory of them and the knowledge of what lay beneath lingered like a phantom limb, a constant reminder of the fragile boundary between our world and something truly ancient and terrifying. Blackwood became a ghost town, a monument to human greed and cosmic horror. The official story became a catastrophic geological event, a convenient lie that buried the truth deeper than any mine shaft. But for those who heard the voices, who lived through the terror, the truth was an indelible mark on their souls, a chilling understanding that some secrets are best left undisturbed, some doors best left locked. So, the next time you stand before a desolate, empty space, a gaping hole in the earth, listen closely. You might not hear the whispers of Blackwood, but you might feel the cold breath of something ancient, something vast, stirring beneath your feet. For the mountain remembers, and the silence it holds is merely the fragile lid on a prison of unimaginable horrors, waiting for the next disturbance to once again scream from the empty mine shaft. The price of knowledge, it seems, is an eternal vigilance against the dark.